The Urantia Book, Section 4, The Life and Teachings of Jesus, Paper 145. 4 eventful days at Capernaum. Jesus and the apostles arrived in Capernaum the evening of Tuesday, January 13th. As usual, they made their headquarters at the home of Zebedee in Bethsaida. Now that John the Baptist had been sent to his death, Jesus prepared to launch out in the first open and public preaching tour of Galilee. The news that Jesus had returned rapidly spread throughout the city, and early the next day, Mary, the mother of Jesus, hastened away, going over to Nazareth to visit her son Joseph. Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, Jesus spent at the Sabbath, instructing his apostles, preparatory to their first extensive public preaching tour. He also received and taught many earnest inquirers, both singly and in groups. Through Andrew, he arranged to speak in the synagogue on the coming Sabbath day. Late on Friday evening, Jesus' baby sister Ruth secretly paid him a visit. They spent almost an hour together in a boat anchored a short distance from the shore. No human being, save John Zebedee, ever knew of this visit, and he was admonished to tell no man. Ruth was the only member of Jesus' family who consistently and unwaveringly believed in the divinity of his earth mission. From the times of her earliest spiritual consciousness, right on down through his eventful ministry, death, resurrection, and ascension, and she finally passed on to the worlds beyond, never having doubted the supernatural character of her brother's mission in the flesh. Baby Ruth was the chief comfort of Jesus as regards his earth family throughout the trying ordeal of his trial, rejection, and crucifixion. 1. The draught of fishes. On Friday morning of this same week, when Jesus was teaching by the seaside, the people crowded him so near the water's edge that he signaled to some fishermen occupying a nearby boat to come to his rescue. Entering the boat, he continued to teach the assembled multitude for more than 2 hours. This boat was named Simon. It was the former fishing vessel of Simon Peter, and had been built by Jesus' own hands. On this particular morning, the boat was being used by David Zebedee and 2 associates who had just come in near shore from a fruitless night of fishing on the lake. And I think here is a misunderstanding with the Bible, in which it is being taught that was Simon Peter was helping Jesus out and giving him his boat. But the boat itself was called Simon, but Jesus himself was just asking help from fishermen that were at that moment there. They were cleaning and mending their nets when Jesus requested them to come to his assistance. After Jesus had finished teaching the people, he said to David, "As you were delayed by coming to my help, now let me work with you. Let us go fishing. Put out into yonder deep and let down your nets for a draught." But Simon, one of David's assistants, answered, Master, it is useless. We toiled all night and took nothing. However, at your bidding, we will put out and let down the nets. And Simon consented to follow Jesus' directions because of a gesture made by his master. David, when they had proceeded to the place designated by Jesus, they let down their nets and enclosed such a multitude of fish that they feared the nets would break, so much so that they signaled to their associates on the shore to come to their assistance. When they had filled all three boats with fish, almost to sinking, this Simon fell down at Jesus' knees, saying, Depart from me, Master, for I am a sinful man. Simon and all who were concerned in this episode were amazed at the draught of fishes. From that day, Zebedee, this Simon, and their associates forsook their nets and followed Jesus. But this was in no sense a miraculous draught of fishes. Jesus was a close student of nature. He was an experienced fisherman and knew the habits of the fish in the Sea of Galilee. On this occasion he merely directed these men to the place where the fish were usually to be found at this time of day. But Jesus' followers always regarded this as a miracle. So here we read a misunderstanding that is later and still is being written in the Bible as a miracle, that Jesus did miracles and wonders. Jesus had decided for himself in the 40 days before starting his public work that he would not do any miracles or wonders. So here we read how carefully Jesus observed the world around him and how he observed nature. This is something we can learn from. He was always going into nature when he tried to So Jesus was a good observer of the workings of nature, and by being a fisherman himself, he observed while he was doing fishing. He was not just sitting in a chair and staring into the open. He was constantly observing how the water moved, how the fishes would move through the water. He observed the tidings. So this was not a miracle. This was just purely based on long-term observing and understanding of how nature works. And this is something we as humans today do not do anymore. We walk through nature and we just look at things in awe, just like, oh, how beautiful is this, how beautiful is that. Yeah, that's nice, but do we truly observe nature? Do we truly observe how the wind is blowing through the trees and from what side the wind is coming? Do we truly observe how the water is working, how the animals are living in nature in such a way that we learn from it, through which if we get this understanding, that we can use this knowledge eventually. The human population in the Western world has lost this actually, because everything now is based on computer models and whatever. So we use devices. But the peoples in what is called by Western humans as primitives, they still use their observance. And they most of the times come with things of which a scientist is blown away by it. Why? Because of the fact how these people observe nature and the workings and tidings in nature. So here we can read that this what is described in the Bible as a miracle and a wonder about these fishes, is not a miracle nor a wonder. 2. Afternoon at the synagogue. The next Sabbath at the afternoon service in the synagogue, Jesus preached his sermon on the will of the Father in heaven. In the morning, Simon Peter had preached on the kingdom. At the Thursday evening meeting of the synagogue, Andrew had taught his subject being the new way. At this particular time, more people believed in Jesus in Capernaum than in any other one city on earth. As Jesus taught in the synagogue this Sabbath afternoon, according to custom, he took the first text from the law, reading from the book of Exodus. And you shall serve the Lord your God, and he shall bless you, and he shall bless your bread and your water. And all sickness shall be taken away from you. He chose the second text from the prophets, reading from Isaiah, also said, Arise and shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord has risen upon you. Darkness may cover the earth, and gross darkens the people, but the Spirit of the Lord shall arise upon you, and the divine glory shall be seen with you. Even the Gentiles shall come to this light, and many great minds shall surrender to the brightness of this light. This sermon was an effort on Jesus' part to make clear the fact that religion is a personal experience, not a group experience, but a personal experience. Among other things, the Master said, You well know that while a kind-hearted father loves his family as a whole, he so regards them as a group because of his strong affection for each individual member of that family. No longer must you approach the Father in heaven as a child of Israel, but as a child of God. And this is exactly what the Father is telling through me to his children that are listening to these audio videos. It is about time that we let go of this idea of God of Israel, God of Abraham, God of Isaac. And that's exactly what this sentence says. No longer must you approach the Father in heaven as a child of Israel, but as a child of God. And this child of Israel concept is still preached unto the day of today. We may let go of this. We need to leave this behind, and we need to accept that we are a child of God. We are not a child of Israel. And then the people say, yeah, the kingdom that is a spiritual kingdom, and that is the spiritual Israel. It's also a misunderstanding. The kingdom is kingdom. The kingdom is the kingdom of God, not the kingdom of Israel. It has nothing to do with Israel. It is the kingdom of God. God is not the God of Israel. God is the God of everyone and all nations. So we may let go of this old understanding of being a child of Israel, of the God of Israel. No, you're a child of God the Father, who is there for all his children. As a group, you are indeed the children of Israel, but as individuals, each one of you is a child of God. And thus, with this said, as a group, you are also part of God. And as a group here means, as a group, you are indeed children of Israel. Yeah, because he was preaching to whom? To the Israelite people. So yeah, if he was preaching here, then he would have said, as a group, you are indeed children of the Netherlands. Or if he would have lived in Australia, then in, let's say, Victoria, then he would have said, as a group, you are indeed children of Victoria. Something like that, of Australia, better said, children of Australia. So, but on individual basis, we are a child of God, not a child of Israel. I'm not a child of the Netherlands. An Australian is not a child of Australia, it's a child of God. All Australians are a child of God. All people living in the Netherlands are a child of God. But rather, to bring this knowledge of God and the revelation of his love and mercy to the individual believer as a genuine personal experience, the prophets have all taught you that Yahweh cares for his people, so-called Yahweh. Because this whole Yahweh concept, people, we may let go of that name. That name is part of an old understanding of whom God the Father is. This understanding is still being preached and belongs to our forebearers. And we may let go of that. We may let go of everything that our forefathers have understood. And we may let go of everything our forefathers have created. And so we may let go of the name Yahweh, because that name is part of our forefathers' understanding of whom God the Father is. And his people. God loves Israel, but I have come among you to proclaim a greater truth, one which many of the later prophets also grasped, that God loves you, every one of you, as individuals. All these generations have you had a national and so a racial religion. Now have I come to give you a personal religion, in which you have personal connection with the God the Father. But even this is not a new idea. Many of the spiritual-minded among you have known this truth, inasmuch as some of the prophets have so instructed you. Have you not read in the scriptures where the prophet Jeremiah says, In those days they shall no more say, the fathers have eaten sour grapes, and the children's teeth are set on edge. Every man shall die for his own iniquities. Every man who eats sour grapes, his teeth shall be set on edge. Behold, the days shall come when I will make a new covenant with my people, not according to the covenant which I made with their fathers, Here it comes. So we really need to let go of all these things from our forefathers. When I brought them out of the land of Egypt, but according to the new way, I will even write my law in their hearts. I will be their God, and they shall be my people. In that day they shall not say one man to his neighbor, Do you know the Lord? Nay, for they shall all know me personally, from the least to the greatest. What does this mean? This all points out to the adjuster, better known as the thought adjuster, the Father fragment that God has bestowed upon us. And with this, God has come into us. He lives in us. And that is why the religion of Jesus Christ, the real Christianity, is based on this personal relationship between you and God the Father himself. That is why Jesus speaks by saying personal religion with a personal God, the Father that is in us, through this thought adjuster. And also, of course, the Holy Spirit and the Spirit of truth. Have you not read these promises? Do you not believe the scriptures? Do you not understand that the prophets' words are fulfilled in what you behold this very day? And did not Jeremiah exhort you to make religion an affair of the heart? To relate yourselves to God as individuals? The later books of the Old Testament are far more valuable to read, actually. The books of Isaiah, Proverbs, Psalm, Obadiah, Micah. These are more the books to read, actually, because these are the men who understood better that what the Melchizedeks, well, better said Machiaventa Melchizedek and his missionaries taught in that time and age. And were you not warned that the natural human heart is deceitful above all things, and oftentimes desperately wicked? Have you not read also where Ezekiel taught even your fathers that religion must become a reality in your individual experiences? No more shall you use the proverb which says, the fathers have eaten sour grapes, and the children's teeth are set on edge. As I live, says the Lord God, behold, all souls are mine. As the soul of the Father, so also the soul of the Son. Only the soul that sins shall die. And then Ezekiel foresaw this, Ezekiel foresaw even this day when he spoke in behalf of God, saying, A new heart also will I give you, and a new spirit will I put within you. So Ezekiel's also, from what I came to understand, indeed a book that is worth reading. But with the rest of the Old Testament, you really need to shift out what is truth and what is actually a myth or a nice story written by men. Because what the Celestials are saying in this Urantia book is that the entire Old Testament, especially the first 8 books, are very distorted. No more should you fear that God will punish a nation for the sin of an individual. Neither will the Father in heaven punish one of his believing children for the sins of a nation, albeit the individual member of any family must often suffer the material consequences of family mistakes and group transgressions. Do you not realize that the hope of a better nation or a better world is bound up in the progress and enlightenment of the individual? So the more we start to leave this old concept, the more we start to leave behind everything our forefathers understood with their capacity of understanding God the Father and understanding life and understanding their challenges. If we leave this behind and start to build a real relationship with God the Father that is in us through this thought adjuster, then we can make a difference in our nation. Then we can literally create changements in our nation that will uplift each and every member of that nation. But as long as people are staying stuck to old stories and understandings coming from our forefathers, the nations decline more and more. And that is exactly what we see. Then the Master portrayed that the Father in heaven, after man discerns the spiritual freedom, wills that his children on earth should begin that eternal ascent of the paradise career, which consists in the creature's conscious response to the divine urge of the indwelling spirit to find the Creator, to know God, and to seek to become like Him. The apostles were greatly helped by this sermon. So this also means that you in your prayer says, let us become each moment by moment more and more as you, God the Father, are. And then we, through prayer, help to uplift our fellow brethren. And with this, we then eventually will see that more and more hearts will be opened, and more people will leave behind everything that our forefathers have understood as whom God the Father is, and all these old things will be then finally left behind us. And then we can start building on the personal religion, which is our relationship between ourselves and God. So again, the apostles were greatly helped by this sermon. All of them realized more fully that the gospel of the kingdom is a message directed to the individual and not to the nation. even though the people of Capernaum, and this is also a thing that is being stated in the Bible, and I'm curious how eventually Jesus is saying this, but in the Bible it is being said that we need to preach the word to all nations, to all peoples and nations. No, we only need to preach it to the individual. And if the individual gets it, and the more individuals gets it, and accepts the sonship, and accepts that God the Father is already in them, and accepts that they are a God of that they are a child of God. So if each individual accepts themselves as a child of God, knows that God through the thought adjuster is already in us, the more people in a nation gets to know this, then eventually the nation will change too. Even though the people of Capernaum were familiar with Jesus' teaching, they were astonished at his sermon on this Sabbath day. He taught indeed as one having authority and not as the scribes. Just as Jesus finished speaking, a young man in the congregation who had been much agitated by his words was seized with a violent epileptic attack and loudly cried out. At the end of the seizure, when recovering consciousness, he spoke in a dreamy state, saying, "What have we to do with you, Jesus of Nazareth? You are the Holy One of God. Have you come to destroy us?" Jesus bade the people be quiet, and taking the young man by the hand said, "Come out of it." And he was immediately awakened. This young man was not possessed of an unclean spirit or demon. He was a victim of ordinary epilepsy, but he had been taught that his affliction was due to possession by an evil spirit. He believed this teaching and behaved accordingly in all that he thought or said concerning his ailment. And I want to go into this too, because nowadays people are constantly speaking that they are being attacked by unclean spirits, by demons, by whatever. If you believe these teachings, what do you create? Then you start to create this reality for yourself, because you believe that. You believe these people whom are constantly speaking about demons, about unclean spirits. So what you believe in, you start to create, and then you start to create a sub-reality for yourself in which this is taking place. If you believe that you're constantly being attacked by whatever, by what the majority of the people, pastors, evangelists, and whatsoever are teaching as demons, as unclean spirits or Nephilims or whatever, then you start to create this reality, and this belief becomes so strong that it literally becomes real. So this gives another perception on this whole idea of spiritual warfare. Because scientists already know how powerful we are in creating things with our mind. Because the world is being created through the mind of God. It was a thought form first that came into existence through word. So everything starts first as a thought. God has a idea as a thought, and then he works it out. So the same with us. If some person constantly speaking about demons, unclean spirits, witchcraft, curses, whatever, not that does not exist, witchcraft does exist, but to what extent? Aren't we creating right now, and not only right now, but for decades now, a reality that is overshadowing the actuality? Is really everything controlled in this world by witchcraft? Or have we started to believe this concept in such a way that we have started believing it as such, and through this have created this sub-reality in our mind? And thus we see it happening. So we need to question all this. And we need to question all this idea of spiritual warfare. The people all believed that such phenomena were directly caused by the presence of an unclean spirit. I want to say that eventually they also go into the existence of spirits and all that sort of things. We get a whole history class on that too in the Urantia journey, book journey. We must not forget that our forebears, our forefathers, understood the world that they were living in, that they were experiencing, with the level of mind that they were on at that moment. And their level of understanding was basic, what we now call primitive. And this basic understanding of our forefathers, who also through this basic understanding had created a belief of that everything was spiritized and had a spirit, because they couldn't grasp who God the Father is. Their level of understanding was not yet there. It was not that they were not willing to understand, but they couldn't understand. Some of them could. And there have been early, very wise men and women who could get more understanding of it. So all this spiritism and all these things, we need to understand that we are still outliving the ideas of our forefathers, the beliefs of our forefathers, the understandings of our forefathers. Ain't it about time in the year 2024, and we're almost at the beginning of 2025, that we are now finally, as peoples, leave all these things behind us and start to walk the path of God the Father and undo ourselves from all these old teachings, old beliefs, old understandings? Accordingly, they believed that Jesus had cast a demon out of this man. So here you can see how this whole Bible is still bonding us. It keeps us in a stronghold of old understandings. old beliefs, old ideas. So that is why we need to pass by the and leave that book behind us and start to create a relationship with God in us. That is the thought adjuster, that God the Father fragment in us that God has bestowed upon us, through which we can start a relationship between us and God, and then see how our life is going, and then see how many new things we get, and how we develop a new world, a new reality. But Jesus didn't cast out any demon. But Jesus did not at that time cure his epilepsy. Not until later on that day, after sundown, was this man really healed. Long after the day of Pentecost, the Apostle John, who was the last to write of Jesus' doings, avoided all reference to these so-called acts of, between quotation marks, casting out devils. And this he did in view of the fact that such cases of demon possession never occurred after Pentecost. Never! Because before Pentecost, Jesus had a confrontation on Mount Hermon with Satan and with Caligasta, who was our former planetary prince. Satan was sitting there in name of itself, and also in behalf of Lucifer, who was at that moment, and still is, in prison world. Satan is not in this world anymore. Caligasta is not in this world anymore, as so far as I have come to understand. Maybe we are dealing with the right hand of Caligasta, whose name is Daligasta. That could be. But actually, everything that could have some interference on this world is gone. So, lovely brothers and sisters, children of God, please leave the Bible. Go beyond it. Step out of all these old stories. Step out of all these old teachings. Leave all the ideas, understandings, practices, and way of living of our forefathers behind you. Go start the relationship that you need to build between you and God the Father. Build this relationship and follow God the Father and go in communion with Him as soon as you have to deal with challenges and so on. Ask His guidance, not running to a book in the bookshelf that is declared by men themselves as a holy book. So that such cases of demon possession never occurred after Pentecost. So all these whom are still teaching about devils and demons, all these teachers, we need to leave them behind us. because they are preaching something old. As a result of this commonplace incident, the report was rapidly spread throughout Capernaum that Jesus had cast a demon out of a man and miraculously healed him in the synagogue. At the conclusion of his afternoon sermon, the Sabbath was just the time for the rapid and effective spreading of such a startling rumor. This report was also carried to all the smaller settlements around Capernaum, and many of the people believed it. The cooking and the housework at the large Zebedee home, where Jesus and the 12 made their headquarters, was for the most part done by Simon Peter's wife and her mother. Peter's home was near that of Zebedee, and Jesus and his friends stopped there on the way from the synagogue because Peter's wife's mother had for several days been sick with chills and fever. Now it chanced that at about the time Jesus stood over this sick woman, holding her hand, smoothing her brow, and speaking words of comfort and encouragement, the fever left her. Jesus had not yet time to explain to his apostles that no miracle had been wrought at the synagogue, and with this incident so fresh and vivid in their minds, and recalling the water and the wine at Cana, which also was not done by Jesus, but was done by some midwayers in combination with the help of some seraphic angels. They seized upon this coincidence as another miracle, and some of them rushed out to spread the news abroad throughout the city. Amatha, Peter's mother-in-law, was suffering from malarial fever. She was not miraculously healed by Jesus at this time. Not until several hours later, after sundown, was her cure effected, in connection with the extraordinary event which occurred in the front yard of the Zebedee home. So it was just by the way he held the hand of this woman, the way he spoke to this woman, that gave something to this woman's soul. And probably in such a way that later on the woman got cured. So this woman started through what Jesus said to her, there was a new level of belief created, probably, through which her soul was able to overcome something, and through this, eventually, this fever disappeared. And these cases are typical of the manner in which a wonder-seeking generation and a miracle-minded people unfailingly seized upon all such coincidences. And unfortunately, history is repeating itself, because there are now many preachers who claiming to do wonders. Are these really wonders done by God? We should question everything as the pretext for proclaiming that another miracle had been wrought by Jesus. But this was not something Jesus wanted. So this was the interpretation of those who were witnessing something that was happened earlier that day in the synagogue, what does the brain do? The brain processes this, and because of the level of understanding the person is functioning on, it interprets the whole situation as, oh, Jesus has done a miracle. It is the interpretation of men, not Jesus who said, look at me, I've done a wonder. No. It's all based on the interpretation of man himself. And what I say, each person has and is on a certain level of understanding. Life itself, God, and life situations. The healing at sundown. By the time Jesus and his apostles had made ready to partake of their evening meal near the end of this eventful Sabbath day, all Capernaum and its environs were agog over these reputed miracles of healing, and all who were sick or afflicted began preparations to go to Jesus or to have themselves carried there by their friends just as soon as the sun went down. And do not forget that people just can believe something if they have seen something happened that makes them believe. For many people, it's difficult to believe in God without a miracle. Didn't Jesus say that those who do not need miracles and wonders eventually have a greater belief than those who need the proof of existence of God by miracles and wonders? According to Jewish teaching, it was not permissible even to go in quest of health during the sacred hours of the Sabbath. Therefore, as soon as the sun sank beneath the horizon, scores of afflicted men, women, and children began to make their way toward the Zebedee home in Bethsaida. One man started out with his paralyzed daughter just as soon as the sun sank behind his neighbor's house. The whole day's events had set the stage for this extraordinary sundown scene. Even the text Jesus had used for his afternoon sermon had intimated that sickness should be banished. And he had spoken with such unprecedented power and authority. Well, Jesus was not just an ordinary teacher, as most of these scribes and those who were doing sermons in the synagogue were. Jesus had a natural authority. That was actually the authority which came from heaven also, was combined with the authority of heaven. He did speak directly to the consciousness and souls of men. Though he did not resort to logic, legal quibbles, or clever sayings, he did make a powerful, direct, clear, and personal appeal to the hearts of his hearers. That Sabbath was a great day in the earth life of Jesus. yes, in the life of a universe. To all local universe intents and purposes, the little Jewish city of Capernaum was the real capital of Nebadon. The handful of Jews in the Capernaum synagogue were not the only beings to hear that momentous closing statement of Jesus' sermon. Hate is the shadow of fear, revenge the mask of cowardice. Neither could his hearers forget his blessed words declaring, "Man is the Son of God, not a child of the devil." Soon, and with this, devil is actually also mentioned, because everywhere where you can read in the Bible the word devil is actually in most cases referring to the former planetary prince Caligustia. Soon after the setting of the sun, as Jesus and the apostles still lingered about the supper table, Peter's wife heard voices in the front yard, and on going to the door saw a large company of sick folks assembling, and that the road from Capernaum was crowded by those who were on their way to seek healing at Jesus' hands. On seeing this sight, she went at once and informed her husband, who told Jesus. When the master stepped out of the front entrance of Zebedee's house, his eyes met an array of stricken and afflicted humanity. He gazed upon almost 1,000 sick and ailing human beings. At least that was the number of persons gathered together before him. So there were far more. Not all present were afflicted. Some had come assisting their loved ones in this effort to secure healing. The sight of these afflicted mortals, men, women, and children, suffering in large measure as a result of the mistakes and misdeeds of his own trusted sons of universe administration, peculiarly touched the human heart of Jesus and challenged the divine mercy of this benevolent Creator Son. But Jesus well knew he could never build an enduring spiritual movement upon the foundation of purely material wonders. It had been his consistent policy to refrain from exhibiting his creator prerogatives. Not since Cana had the supernatural or miraculous attended his teaching. Still, this afflicted multitude touched his sympathetic heart and mightily appealed to his understanding affection. A voice from the yard exclaimed, "Master, speak the word, restore our health, heal our diseases, and save our souls." No sooner had these words been uttered than a vast retinue of seraphim, physical controllers, life carriers, and midwayers, such as always attended this incarnated creator of a universe, made themselves ready to act with creative power should their sovereign give the signal. This was one of those moments in the earth career of Jesus in which divine wisdom and human compassion were so interlocked in the judgment of the Son of Man that he sought refuge in appeal to his Father's will. When Peter implored the Master to heed their cry for help, Jesus, looking down upon the afflicted throng, answered, "I have come into the world to reveal the Father and establish his kingdom. For this purpose have I lived my life to this hour. If therefore it should be the will of him, the Father in heaven, who sent me, and not inconsistent with my dedication to the proclamation of the gospel of the kingdom of heaven, I would desire to see my children made whole, but the further words of Jesus were lost in the tumult. Jesus had passed the responsibility of this healing decision to the ruling of his Father. Evidently, the Father's will interposed no objection, for the words of the Master had scarcely been uttered when the assembly of celestial personalities serving under the command of Jesus' personalized thought adjuster was mightily austere. The vast retinue descended into the midst of this motley throng of afflicted mortals, and in a moment of time 683 men, women, and children were made whole, were perfectly healed of all their physical diseases and other material disorders. Such a scene was never witnessed on earth before that day, nor since that day. And for those of us who were present to behold this creative wave of healing, it was indeed a thrilling spectacle. But again, did Jesus this healing? No. It was the Father, God the Father himself, who gave the signs to the celestial host, to the midwayers, to the seraphims, to the life carriers. They were the ones who healed the people. And they were healed because Jesus first went to the Father and spoke to the people that he only was here and into the world to reveal the Father and establish his kingdom. And then he says to the crowd, if it should be the will of him who sent me, then so it shall happen that you will be healed. And because he went to the Father, by asking the Father his help, and also asking, if this is in your will, let it then take place. So it was God the Father himself who gave the sign to the seraphim host, to the midwayers, to the life carriers. Physical controllers. But of all the beings who were astonished at this sudden and unexpected outbreak of supernatural healing, Jesus was the most surprised. It surprised him. So this is really a witnessing that Jesus did not do anything himself. The same with the water that was changed into wine. Was not Jesus that did this. Was the life carriers, midwayers, and seraphims who did this. But this is something that this so-called holy book is not telling us. And this is due to Paul, because Paul has idolized the spiritual side of Jesus. So we can read here that even Jesus was the most surprised. So the same with this woman, this wife of Peter. You can say, actually, who was healing this woman? Life carrier, seraphic being, seraphic angel. Because we all have a team of helpers, celestial ministering helpers, and we have two seraphic angels, a cherubim angels, a mighty messenger in it, a few midwayers. There's a life carrier, I think, also in it, a solitary messenger, the recording angels, who records everything we say, what we say, think, and do, and some other celestial helpers of which we have no name for yet. In a moment when his human interests and sympathies were focused upon the scene of suffering and affliction there spread out before him, he neglected to bear in his human mind the admonitory warnings of his personalized adjuster regarding the impossibility of limiting the time element of the creator prerogatives of a creator's son under certain conditions and in certain circumstances. Jesus desired to see these suffering mortals made whole if his Father's will would not thereby be violated. This is very important to understand. The personalized adjuster of Jesus instantly ruled that such an act of creative energy at that time would not transgress the will of the Paradise Father. And by such a decision, in view of Jesus, his preceding expression of healing desire, the creative act was. What a creator's son desires and his Father wills is not in all of Jesus his subsequent earth life did another such en masse physical healing of mortals take place. Wow! Alright, this makes us asking questions about all these, what is called revivals. What are they? Are they really done with are they really done from the will of God? Or is it something else? I don't know. I still have some difficulties with that. But anyways, I continue, as might have been expected, the fame of this sundown healing at Bethsaida in Capernaum spread throughout all Galilee and Judea and to the regions beyond. Once more were the fears of Herod aroused, and he sent watchers to report on the work and teachings of Jesus and to ascertain if he was the former carpenter of Nazareth or John the Baptist risen from the dead. Chiefly because of this unintended demonstration of physical healing, henceforth throughout the remainder of his earth career, Jesus became as much a physician as a preacher. True, he continued his teaching, but his personal work consisted mostly in ministering to the sick and the distressed, while his apostles did the work of public preaching and baptizing believers. But the majority of those who were recipients of supernatural or creative physical healing at this sundown demonstration of divine energy were not permanently spiritually benefited by this extraordinary manifestation of mercy. A small number were truly edified by this physical ministry, but the spiritual kingdom was not advanced in the hearts of men by this amazing eruption of timeless creative healing. And it could also be that the Father himself, he does not like to see so many of his children suffering. So maybe that was also, something that played along with it. The healing wonders which every now and then attended Jesus' mission on earth were not a part of his plan of proclaiming the kingdom. Never was. So this makes us think about all that the Bible is speaking of, about all these miracles and wonders that Jesus did and walking on water. Jesus never walked on water. This is all coming and stemming from all those by men interpreted understanding of a situation that happened. In association with they were incidentally inherent in having on earth a divine being of well nigh unlimited creator prerogatives, in association with an unprecedented combination of divine mercy and human sympathy. This can happen if you have then truly sympathy. If you have truly sympathy for your fellow brethren, and you ask through prayer help from God the Father, then I truly believe that God is then doing healing work and using creative healing and doing creative healing. But there must be a combination of divine mercy and real human sympathy that comes really from your heart. But again, they say here, but such so-called miracles gave Jesus much trouble in that they provided produce, raising publicity and afforded much unsought notoriety. Four, the evening after. Throughout the evening following this great outburst of healing, the rejoicing and happy throng overran Zebedee's home, and the apostles of Jesus were keyed up to the highest pitch of emotional enthusiasm. From a human standpoint, this was probably the greatest day of all the great days of their association with Jesus. And this whole event started eventually to live its own life. And things in early days went from mouth to mouth. So things that go from mouth to mouth, eventually some people add this to it, others add this to it, and so becomes a story on its own and of its own. This was probably the greatest day of all the great days of their association with Jesus. At no time before or after did their hopes surge to such heights of confident expectation. Jesus had told them only a few days before, and when they were yet within the borders of Samaria, that the hour had come when the kingdom was to be proclaimed in power. And now their eyes had seen what they supposed was the fulfillment of that promise. So they themselves made the conclusion themselves without Jesus speaking about it. So they themselves made the conclusion that what happened at Zebedee's home in the front yard was a fulfillment of that promise of proclaiming the kingdom in power. And that power, what they saw in their understanding, proclaimed that the kingdom was coming and had come. They were thrilled by the vision of what was to come if this amazing manifestation of healing power was just the beginning. Their lingering doubts of Jesus' divinity were banished. They were literally intoxicated with the ecstasy of their bewildered enchantment. Bewildered enchantment. But when they sought for Jesus, they could not find him. The master was much perturbed by what had happened. These men, women, and children who had been healed of diverse diseases lingered late into the evening, hoping for Jesus, his return, that they might thank him. The apostles could not understand the master's conduct as the hours passed and he remained in seclusion. Their joy would have been full and perfect but for his continued absence. When Jesus did return to their midst, the hour was late and practically all of the beneficiaries of the healing episode had gone to their homes. Jesus refused the congratulations and adoration of the 12 and the others who had lingered to greet him, only saying, "Rejoice, not that my Father is powerful to heal the body, but rather that he is mighty to save the soul. Let us go to our rest, for tomorrow we must be about the Father's business." So Jesus says, rejoice, not that my Father is powerful to heal the body, but rather that he is mighty to save the soul. And again did 12 disappointed, perplexed, and heart-sorrowing men go to their rest. Few of them, except the twins, slept much that night. No sooner would the Master do something to cheer the souls and gladden the hearts of his apostles than he seemed immediately to dash their hopes in pieces and utterly to demolish the foundations of their courage and enthusiasm. As these bewildered fishermen looked into each other's eyes, there was but one thought: we cannot understand him. What does all this mean? 5. And that is the last subchapter. Early Sunday morning. Neither did Jesus sleep much that Saturday night. He realized that the world was filled with physical distress and overrun with material difficulties, and he contemplated the great danger of being compelled to devote so much of his time to the care of the sick and afflicted that his mission of establishing the spiritual kingdom in the hearts of men would be interfered with, or at least subordinated to the ministry of things physical. Because of these and similar thoughts which occupied the mortal mind of Jesus during the night, he arose that Sunday morning long before daybreak and went all alone to one of his favorite places for communion with the Father. The theme of Jesus' prayer on this early morning was for wisdom and judgment, that he might not allow his human sympathy joined with his divine mercy to make such an appeal to him in the presence of mortal suffering, that all of his time would be occupied with physical ministry to the neglect of the spiritual. Though he did not wish altogether to avoid ministering to the sick, he knew that he must also do the more important work of spiritual teaching and religious training. So Jesus went out in the hills to pray so many times because there were no private rooms suitable for his personal devotions. Peter could not sleep that night, so very early, shortly after Jesus had gone out to pray, he aroused James and John, and the three went to find their master. After more than an hour's search, they found Jesus and besought him to tell them the reason for his strange conduct. They desired to know why he appeared to be troubled by the mighty outpouring of the Spirit of healing. When all the people were overjoyed, and his apostles so much rejoiced. For more than 4 hours, Jesus endeavored to explain to these 3 apostles what had happened. He taught them about what had transpired and explained the dangers of such manifestations. Jesus confided to them the reason for his coming forth to pray. He sought to make plain to his personal associates, the real reasons why the kingdom of the Father could not be built upon wonder-working and physical healing. Well, and this, my lovely, beautiful brethren, children of the living God, this is exactly in what I'm saying with history is repeating itself again. Because what do we see? A lot of preachers are doing miracles, but are these miracles really resulting that people really start to believe in God the Father from their heart? So what we see is repetition of history, that there are many people who only can believe in the existence of God the Father if they can see miracles, and if they can be witnessing miracles and wonders, if they can experience a miracle. But it is really stated here, the kingdom of God cannot be built on miracles. Cannot be built upon wonder-working and physical healing. This is what he is saying, what Jesus is teaching. The real reasons why the kingdom of the Father could not be built upon wonder-working and physical healing. So we need to question every single thing that is happening right under our nose these days. And all those preachers, evangelists, and what they are actually doing. And are they not actually repeating history? Yes, they do. Because the people that are coming to these days that they are organizing to organize healing and what is it, salvation from unclean spirits and demons and whatever. These people that come to these preachers and evangelists for such events, these people cannot believe God the Father purely from their heart. So these people have no living faith. They did not build a living faith by building up this relationship between themselves and God the Father. They need miracles and wonders to believe the existence of God the Father. But are these miracles a strong foundation for their living belief in God the Father? No. That is clearly what Jesus is teaching here. Because he's clearly stating that the kingdom of the Father cannot be built upon wonder-working and physical healing. It's built on living faith. It's through living faith and accepting that you are a child of God that you can see God in your life by following His will. Following His will means that you are following the pathway of God that will lead you onto the path of light and life, that eventually will lead you into paradise and being able one day, one moment better said, one moment in your existence to meet God the Father Himself in paradise as a spiritual human being that has the experience of knowing what it is to be a mortal in the flesh. But unfortunately they could not comprehend his teaching. Meanwhile, early Sunday morning, other crowds of afflicted souls and many curiosity seekers began to gather about the house of Zebedee. They clamored to see Jesus. Andrew and the apostles were so perplexed that while Simon Zelotes talked to the assembly, Andrew, with several of his associates, went to find Jesus. When Andrew had located Jesus in company with the three, he said, "Master, why do you leave us alone with the multitude? Behold, all men seek you. Never before have so many sought after your teaching. Even now the house is surrounded by those who have come from near and far because of your mighty works." Well, it was not mighty works of Jesus, but that's something they did not understand. "Will you not return with us to minister to them?" When Jesus heard this, he answered, "Andrew, I have not taught you and these others that my mission on earth is the revelation of the Father, and my message the proclamation of the kingdom of heaven?" So he says this, when Jesus heard this, he answered by saying to Andrew, "Andrew, have I not taught you and these others that my mission on earth is the revelation of the Father, and my message the proclamation of the kingdom of heaven? How is it then that you would have me turn aside from my work for the gratification of the curious and for the satisfaction of those who seek for signs and wonders, and who need signs and wonders to believe in God the Father? Have we not been among these people all these months, and have they flocked in multitudes to hear the good news of the kingdom? Why have they now come to beseech us? Is it not because of the healing of their physical bodies rather than as a result of the reception of spiritual truth for the salvation of their souls? When men are attracted to us because of extraordinary manifestations, many of them come seeking not for truth and salvation, but rather in quest of healing for their physical ailments. This is exactly what is going on nowadays. All these people whom are seeking these events are not seeking for the truth. They are seeking to get rid of their physical ailments, and are actually people who do not really want to seek God the Father in themselves, and who do not truly want to build up this personal religion between them and God the Father himself. But are attention seekers, because they are so hopeless, never did a prayer to the Father, but only see these events as a scapegoat. And then they are physically healed. But are they really? Because if you you can be physical. Let's put it this way. I truly believe that you can for permanently be physically healed if you, after such an event, are really seeking for truth and are really seeking to are really seeking for God, and from that seeking really want to have the truth by getting to know God that is in you. But if you are not really wanting this, then you can go to such an event and you get some physical healment. You can be physically be healed, but if you neglect the rest and are not really searching for the truth and are placing God on are idolizing God in a way he doesn't want to be worshipped, because then you're not worshiping God, you're idolizing God, and God sees that as not true worship. True worship comes really from the relationship, the personal relationship that you built between you and God the Father. In that interaction. So you can be physically healed, but then you need to make the next step, and that is wanting to know God the Father and really want to see God in you. And by seeking God in you, you want to know God the Father. If you say this in prayer, I want to know you, God the Father. I want to know whom you are. What is your character? What are your attributes? Whom are you? Then, step by step, you will receive truth. Because what is truth? There is being said that the truth sets you free, but what is that truth? That truth, is that not you seeking God the Father and wanting to know God the Father, and through this building up this personal relationship, religion between you and God the Father? When men are attracted to us because of extraordinary manifestations, many of them come seeking not for truth and salvation, but rather in quest of healing for their physical ailments and to secure deliverance from their material difficulties. And seeking truth is actually knowing that you are a child of God and the acceptance of sonship. All this time I have been in Capernaum, and both in the synagogue and by the seaside have I proclaimed the good news of the kingdom to all who had ears to hear and hearts to receive the truth. It is not the will of my Father that I should return with you to cater to these curious ones and to become occupied with the ministry of things physical to the exclusion of the spiritual, because the kingdom of God is all about spiritual. It is the growing of our soul and the relationship between our soul and God. Because eventually we become spiritual human beings. All this time I have been in Capernaum, and both in the synagogue and by the seaside have I proclaimed the good news of the kingdom to all who had ears to hear and hearts to receive the truth. It is not the will of my Father that I should return with you to cater to these curious ones and to become occupied with the ministry of things physical to the exclusion of the spiritual. I have ordained you to preach the gospel and minister to the sick. Minister to the sick means that the apostles were only bringing the word of, and thus the preaching, the good news of the kingdom. That's what they did. But I must not become engrossed in healing to the exclusion of my teaching. No, Andrew, I will not return with you. Go and tell the people to believe in that which we have taught them, and to rejoice in the liberty of the sons of God, and make ready for our departure for the other cities of Galilee, where the way has already been prepared for the preaching of the good tidings of the kingdom. The good tidings of the kingdom are, again, accepting sonship. Through accepting sonship, you acknowledge God the Father that is in our heart. You acknowledge that God the Father is in you, is in your heart, it's in your mind because of the thought adjuster. And the good tidings comes if you are doing the will of the Father. Better said, if you are following the pathway that the Father wants you to walk. It was for this purpose that I came forth from the Father. And it is actually with this purpose we all came forth from the Father. Go then and prepare for our immediate departure, while I here await your return. When Jesus had spoken, Andrew and his fellow apostles sorrowfully made their way back to Zebedee's house, dismissed the assembled multitude, and quickly made ready for the journey as Jesus had directed. And so, on the afternoon of Sunday, January the 18th, AD 28, Jesus and the apostles started out upon their first really public and open preaching tour of the cities of Galilee. On this first tour, they preached the gospel of the kingdom in many cities. But they did not visit Nazareth. That Sunday afternoon, shortly after Jesus and his apostles had left for Capernaum, his brothers James and Jude came to see him, calling at Zebedee's house. About noon of that day, Jude had sought out his brother James and insisted that they go to Jesus. By the time James consented to go with Jude, Jesus had already departed. The apostles were loath to leave the great interest which had been aroused at Capernaum. Peter calculated that no less than 1,000 believers could have been baptized into the kingdom. Jesus listened to them patiently, but he would not consent to return. Silence prevailed for a season, and then Thomas addressed his fellow apostles, saying, "Let's go! The Master has spoken. No matter if we cannot fully comprehend the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, of one thing we are certain, We follow a teacher who seeks no glory for himself. And reluctantly they went forth to preach the good tidings in the cities of Galilee. So Thomas is really an apostle that was actually misunderstood also by many writers and later writers, and always been placed in that corner of the doubting Thomas. But he was the only one actually who saw that Jesus was not seeking glory for himself. He saw this. In comparison to the others who didn't saw. So with this said, I have come to the end of reading paper 145, which was all about the eventful days at Capernaum. Let us learn from this, all these words of wisdom. Let us learn from what Jesus has taught to us. Let all the words sink into your heart, mind, and soul, and that these words may renew your heart, your soul, and your mind in such a way that all the former beliefs and understandings and old ideas of our forefathers will be washed away from our heart, soul, and mind. And with this said, I thank you for listening, and God bless you.